Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're having a look at another devblog for updates New Power, and this time it's time to have a look at a new American ground vehicle that is coming to the game. This is the M1128 Stryker MGS, and it's going to be coming to the American tree at rank 7, and it's going to be classed as a light tank, or I suppose a tank destroyer. It's coming after the M68-2, so that's where it's going to be in the tree, so at least what it means is if you're not interested in this machine, the modifications on the M68-2 will be reduced, which is always good. Now, this machine has quite an interesting history. With the following end of the Cold War, the US Army theorists believed that the armored branch of the armed forces was no longer suitably equipped to perform future operations, projected to be low-intensity operations. So because of this, the need for a new vehicle arose, which would bridge the gap between the heavily and lightly armored units, so therefore they tried to make kind of, I suppose, a stopgap measure. To address this, the Army issued a set of requirements for the new vehicle and invited close to a dozen manufacturers to design demonstrated vehicles to be tested in late 1999, and among them was the General Dynamics Land Systems, the LAV-3-105, which was eventually seen as the winner of the competition in November 2000. Shortly after this, the LAV-3-105 received the name Stryker, and there were plans to manufacture around 2,100 of the units. And in 2002, the M1128 MGS was built. It had a few technical difficulties and also deficiencies in design, which caused delays to the start of its production, but by 2005, low-rate production of the vehicle was approved, while the new shortcomings in the design were found, and eventually the vehicle received a significant redesign of certain elements in 2008, being later approved for full production in 2014. So during the early production phase, several Stryker MGSs were sent overseas for combat trials in the Middle East, of which 3 would be lost, and at present there are over 140 M128 Stryker MGSs which have been built and actively serve with the US Army. So not close to the 2,000 that they were looking at, but I suppose it's getting there eventually. So when we have a look at this vehicle, this was available on the dev server, by the way, so if you want to check out the dev server video on it, make sure to do so. There is a lot of interesting pieces, I suppose, to this vehicle. First of all, because it's a wheeled vehicle, means that it's going to struggle on stuff like winter and desert maps. It's kind of interesting when it comes to this devblog because they compare it to the Centauro and the Type 16 MCV, and the idea is they're trying to compare like for like. They're going, well, these are high tier wheeled vehicles with a decent gun. Here is the Stryker, which is the same. I don't think they're like for like. The Centauro and the Type 16 MCV are going to be a lot faster than this vehicle when they're fully upgraded. The Stryker is actually quite a chunky boy and doesn't have a ton of armor to back it up. So the comparison I think that would be made is, yes, it is the same style of vehicle, but the issue is the high speed of it. When testing it on the dev server, this thing was not very fast at all, and I feel like you're going to be way more dependent on the gun compared to anything else. And the gun that this thing has is a strong one. It's the 105mm M68 A1E8, and it's a further development of the M68 cannon, and it does have a 2-plane stabilizer, also has access to thermals, and also has access to the M900 round. So this gun is going to slap. I think it's pretty much as simple as that. This gun is going to be able to do whatever it feels like to any target it wants, because having M900 at 9.0 is absolutely insane for a vehicle like this. It's coming in at the same BR as other vehicles such as the Leopard 105, so we're going to have to see how both of them stack up against each other. But generally, when we look at the Stryker, I think it's going to have the most powerful gun at 9.0 in the game, so that's a big feather in its cap. Armor-wise, though, it's struggling. And so we did a few tests on the dev server, because one of the big things about this thing is it has an unmanned turret. That top part is just a, it's basically the gun, the breech, and then the auto-loading system. All of the crew, you can see like the vision ports for it, or at least you can see the vision ports for some of them right there on the sides. The 2 crew members are actually below the turret in the hull. There's 3 crew in total. You've got the driver at the front, and then you've also got the 2 crew members below the turret itself. And basically, when it came to the vehicle, the armor protection is incredibly light. It's obviously got the mesh around it, and it's got a composite screen which actually covers its wheels. So the most protected part of this vehicle is its wheels, which is funny enough. But this is just an LAV3 chassis, which is really not, going to be very strong at withstanding fire. The other thing as well when it comes to the turret, so on the dev server, the turret of the Stryker was hull breakable. This meant that you could just shoot it in the turret and it would die. My guess is simulating if this thing actually got shot in the turret, just the whole thing would just go kaput. Now, whether they're going to keep that or not is obviously an interesting conversation, because one thing you have to understand is when Wally came out, so the M901, it went from a situation of being indestructible when it was hull down to being hull breakable, and then getting to the point where you can actually destroy its turret, but on top of that as well, you have to do it by hitting the ATGM while it's in the barrel of the turret. I'm wondering if you're going to have to do a similar situation with the Stryker, or if they're just going to make it so it's hull breakable all the time, or if they're just going to get rid of hull break and it's going to be really annoying to kill this thing. Any of these are possible. Any of these are possible over time. The fact is, when we look at some of the other factors of the Stryker, this thing has a total ammunition count of 18. For some reason, this is seen as a bad thing on the Stryker. I don't see it myself. Generally, at high tiers, I take 15 rounds in the majority of vehicles. The only vehicles I take more in are ones which have a higher ready rack, so 18 or 16 or 22, depending on which vehicle and which ready rack you're talking about, or which rack is covered in blowout panels. So 18 shells seems completely fine to me on a vehicle like this. It does have a 2-stage autoloader in a way. So you've got the first stage, which has it has the 8 rounds in it, I believe, and those feed into the gun itself, and then it has 10 rounds behind it, which is automatically put into the area where there are those 8 rounds. So as you're firing, the 8 rounds, it's getting automatically replaced by some of the 10 rounds in the back by an automatic system. I'm wondering if this is going to be simulated in game, or if they're just going to make it how it is on every other autoloaded vehicle, where it just takes a very long time to fill up the autoloader because it's simulating it being manually done. That is definitely a question that has to be asked. So mobility-wise, I would say this thing is lower than a lot of its predecessors that are already in the game. When it comes to its lethality is through the roof. When it comes to the machine, it's got a good reload, it's got a ridiculous gun, and access to thermals, so that's always going to be fun. And then when it comes to its armor protection is non-existent. What I'm basically trying to tell you is this is going to be a glass cannon. It's going to be a very large glass cannon, and we do have quite a lot of them in the game, but this is going to be one of the deadliest that exists in the game. It has the best round, it has the best gun, and it will have the ability to be able to just keep firing over and over and over again. It'll be interesting to see if they fix one of the issues that the Stryker had, though, on the dev server, where on the right-hand side, if you looked over the right-hand side, you would have the fumes from the engine come out, and that would block your thermal sight. I'm wondering if they're going to reduce that, or if they're going to change that at all. and also if they're going to change the hull brake stuff like I talked about before. This thing will also get absolutely annihilated by artillery. I'm wondering if they're also going to give it scouting, because two of the vehicles that they mentioned there, the Centaur and the Type 16, both of them have scouting, but the Stryker did not. So we'll see what they decide to do with that. Overall, this machine is looking very fun, if not a very specialist vehicle. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Trigger Hippie, Universe, Conte Baraka, Elove Goat, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Hans, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.